They moved me into the basement and gave my bedroom to guests. The next morning, I transferred the $3.50 M house into my name only and gave them 30 days to vacate. I should have known that night marked something deeper. Downstairs in my small damp room, I realized I belonged to silence. Now it smelled like damp and regret. My cardigan felt threadbare, and though it had been my favorite, I tossed it onto the bed as though shedding memory. I tightened the old elastic in my graying hair, and for once, I thought I might rise instead of sink beneath the weight of my bones. I made my way upstairs, as I had done for decades, to greet the guests, men and women in designer suits flown in from Wall Street and California's sunlit expanses, faces I knew only as titles. And yet, I did not get halfway up before Mira materialized at the top of the stairs with that sickly, manufactured smile she wore as armor and extended one delicate hand toward me, stopping me mid-step. "Mother," she said, her tone mocking velvet, "you should stay downstairs tonight. The guests, our important guests, should not be reminded that we house an old maid." Her lips curved upward, and I understood everything with that breath. I nodded, silent. I turned my feet back to the stairs and descended, as if water carried me, each step a farewell. I did not respond, because words could not weave a defense against lines like knives, and color the air with dignity when gravity had already claimed it all. My hands shook as I closed the basement door and leaned against it. I slid the door shut softly and leaned against it, letting the impact linger in my runes of patience. I gathered my breath, prepared to settle into that hollowed sanctuary, accepting that I belonged there, where light was cautious and the laughter above felt foreign, dulling to the yearnings of my own bones. Then, only minutes later, I heard movement, a crinkle of plastic, the thunk of something heavy, and I froze, heart tripping over the silence. The door creaked again, and Mira's silhouette spilled into the gloom with that bag dangling in one hand, its contents heavy with malice. She stood there, calves tight, her high heels clicking throaty congratulations on the hardwood. She looked at me, her tone as cold as broken glass when she whispered, "Watch," and she opened the bag. My breath caught in my throat as she lifted a rat, a fat, deformed sewer rat, slick and dead, and tossed it, barely, onto the bare basement floor, right beside the thin blanket I had folded as makeshift bedding. It landed with a wet slap, the smell of decay bleeding into the damp corners of the room. My chest stilled. My limbs froze. Mira bent to sweep the rat into a tighter circle around my feet and spoke again, leaning close to me, curls brushing my cheek. "You are like this. Dead, useless, stinking. No one touches you. No one waits for you. You are the house's disease." I watched the rat's paws curl, its fur matted, and I realized then that this moment was not about rats. It was about the hush after it, the statement made when a beloved item becomes garbage. The basement felt colder, the light sharper as if mocking me. I stood silent, staring at the rat and my trembling hands, a relic they saw but refused to see. Some minutes passed like hours before I heard steps, slow, steady. Eric's voice, confused, called for Mira. His steps came hard and faint, halting at the top of the basement stairs. He paused at the threshold, eyes wide and uncomprehending. I did not move to plead for help. I did not step toward him. I met his gaze, old gray eyes to younger blue eyes, without anger or forgiveness, only truth shining between us. Mira breezed past him, brushing his shoulder with a scented sleeve, and said, bright as a knife, "I took care of it. Mother is fine. Go back upstairs and amuse the guests." He looked back at me, shredded silence in his eyes, but he stepped back up. He climbed those stairs as if peeling his heart off me. Not a word. I watched his back recede, the door clicking shut above, the suffocated noise of laughter returning. I stood there silent with the rat, breathing bottled air that had forgotten how to warm me. I did not fold the blanket neatly. Instead, I knelt to the rat, and gently, with trembling hands, wrapped it in the edge of the blanket. I tied that blanket in a small knot, tucking the dead life inside, as though I were preserving a secret grave. I carried it to the old plastic trash bag, slid it inside, tied the knot tight, and set the bundle away from where I lay. I dared to pretend it had never happened, even though everything had changed. I smoothed the corner of my blanket with a thumb turned callous. As the incandescent basement bulb flickered, I whispered into the emptiness what would become a promise, not a confession. Even a rat that dies might spread disease, my child, but mother has begun to rise, not from sickness, not from time, but from everything too many people think they own. And then I turned off the light, and in the blue flicker of my closing vision, I felt something awaken within me. Not bitterness, not brokenness, but the slow burn of reclaiming the worth they refuse to see. When people talk about mothers, they imagine lullabies, not cracked hands and burnt coffee smells. But I wasn't built to be warm. I was built to survive, and I raised Eric the only way I knew how, by bleeding so he wouldn't have to. Eric barely cried as a baby. Maybe he sensed I was carrying too much already. His father left before he could walk, left us a guitar, a stack of unpaid bills, and an eviction notice the day after Christmas. Eric watched everything. He didn't ask for much, just a pencil, a napkin, a quiet corner. He drew me once, tired, worn, real, and it nearly broke me. At first, I was proud. But pride turned into fear the day he said, "I want to be an artist." I told him no. Not kindly, not with stories, just no. One day, he skipped homework to finish a painting of a stray dog. I tore it in half. Told him, "No one pays for pretty, they pay for answers." He didn't cry, just stopped showing me his work. Still, I tried to steer him gently, hired a retired illustrator, paid him under the table to teach Eric, not to grow him, but to show him his limits. But the man praised him, called him gifted. Eric believed it, thought I was the jealous one, started applying to art schools behind my back. And when the rejection letter came, thin, cold, final, he handed it to me like it was my fault. "You killed what made me matter," he said. I didn't answer, because maybe, in trying to protect him, I had. He threw the letter on the table. It simply said, "We regret to inform you." I tried to offer comfort. I tried to say maybe it was for the best, that he could still draw, still love art, but make a life that held together. He screamed. He told me I had sabotaged him, made him feel small, made him afraid of wanting more. He said, "You killed it. You killed the only thing that made me feel like I mattered." I did not defend myself. I could have told him about the money I spent, the hours I worked, the notebooks full of sketches I had saved in a box under my bed. I could have told him I did it out of love, out of fear, out of desperation, but what good would that have done? So I let him believe what he needed to believe. He enrolled in a business program instead. 4 years later, he was already managing portfolios, flipping real estate, and speaking at panels with men twice his age. He bought the house in Baton Rouge after marrying Mira, though of course the down payment came from my late husband's life insurance. I signed over the land it stood on to help them qualify for the best mortgage rates. Eric did not thank me. He did not need to. He believed, truly believed that his success had nothing to do with me. He never brought up art again. But every now and then, when he thought no one was looking, I would see him sketching in the margins of his notebooks. Doodles at best. Nothing like what he used to make. The lines were rushed, safe, dead. As if someone had clipped his wings and he now flapped just to feel movement. And I? Well, I mourned in silence. Not for the artist he might have been, but for the man who could not forgive me for trying to protect him in the only way I knew how. Because that was always the root of our war. I gave him shelter when he wanted wings. I gave him armor when he wanted wonder. I gave him walls, and he wanted windows. He once told a colleague on the phone, not knowing I was within earshot, "My mother made sure I would never fail, but she also made sure I would never feel free." I stood in the hallway that night, holding a cup of tea that had gone cold, and thought, he will never know the nights I cried, because he did not fail, because I had done the right thing, and the right thing cost me my son. Mira never asked. She never cared. To her, I was always the woman who had failed as a parent, because my son still held resentment. She did not understand that some resentments are born not from abuse, but from protection that came wrapped in the wrong shape. But the weight of that misunderstanding, of that thankless, lonely success, was mine to carry. And I did, for decades, until the night she threw a dead rat at my feet and called me the same. until I saw in Eric's eyes not pain, not love, but indifference. That was when I knew. I had not failed to protect him, but I had failed to protect myself. And perhaps, for the first time in my long, weary life, it was time I stopped carrying other people's resentments and started carrying my own worth. I moved in because they said they needed me. That is what they told people anyway. Eric said it on the phone, loud enough for the rest of the office to hear. We're bringing Mom to live with us so she can be with the grandkids. Family comes first. It sounded noble, responsible, like a man fulfilling some sacred duty. No one heard what came after the calls ended. No one saw how fast that welcome wore off. It began simply enough. I broke my hip. A silly fall on the front steps of the little rental I had moved into after my husband passed. The doctor told me I needed 6 months of supervised recovery. I remember how relieved I was when Eric said, "Come stay with us. The house has more than enough space." I believed him. I truly did. I thought it would be temporary, just long enough for the bone to heal, for the walker to be replaced by a cane, and then, maybe, for me to help with the kids. Make dinner once in a while. Be part of the noise again. But it only took a week for the tone to shift. It always starts with small things, barely perceptible. A look held too long, a pause before answering, the disappearance of a seat at the dinner table. Mira began labeling shelves in the fridge, one for her almond milk and cold brew, another for the kids' lunches, one for Eric's protein shakes. I asked once if I could put my leftover soup on the top shelf, where it would be easier to reach. She said, "That's the display shelf. It needs to look nice. Yours can go in the back." The kids were polite at first, but children mimic tone even faster than words. Emma stopped asking me to read her stories at bedtime. Caleb started calling me the old lady when he thought I was out of earshot. One night I heard Mira laugh as she poured wine into tall glasses, saying to a friend over the phone, "It's like having a ghost that complains about the temperature." But I still tried. I cooked dinner most nights, nothing fancy, just things I used to make for Eric when we had nothing but rice and canned beans. I folded laundry, even Mira's silk blouses, though I always felt the contempt in the way she refolded them afterward. I kept the house clean, took out the trash, swept the porch. I even watered her overpriced plants when she forgot. Still, it was never enough. Mira liked to remind me in small, cutting ways. Once, I made spaghetti for the kids. Emma told me it tasted better than her mother's. Mira smiled and said, "That's sweet, honey, but Grandma doesn't understand modern nutrition." Then she scraped the meal into the trash and ordered Thai. Another time, she stood in the kitchen with her phone in one hand and a tax document in the other. She said, loud enough for Eric to hear, "You know, we really need to look into home insurance. Having an elderly person living here raises liability. What if she falls again?" I said nothing. That became my habit. Not out of cowardice, but because I had long learned that speaking only made the silence afterward more painful. Still, I remember each word, especially the one that broke me. It was a Tuesday, rainy. I had just finished cleaning up after breakfast. The kids had gone to school. Mira stood at the kitchen island, sipping her coffee, eyes on her tablet. I asked if she needed me to pick up anything from the store. Without looking up, she said, "You don't need to act like this is your house. You're not on the deed. You're a guest, well, really, a temporary resident." I stood there, holding a dish rag. I must have looked foolish, old, bent, still trying to be helpful. I wanted to ask her, did she know who signed over the land this house sat on? Did she remember that when the bank refused them the first time, it was my credit history and my late husband's pension that backed the loan? But I said nothing, because I also remembered something my own mother had told me. When someone wants to forget what you gave, reminding them only hardens their shame into cruelty. Later that day, Eric came home early from a meeting. Mira pulled him aside in the living room. I was on the other side of the wall folding towels. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp. "She's taking up space," she said. "I can't breathe in this house anymore. She hovers. She comments on everything. I feel like I'm raising 3 kids, not 2. Eric sighed. I could hear the exhaustion in it, real or rehearsed, I could not say. Then came his voice, the same voice he used when he was 7 and trying to explain to his teacher why he hadn't done his reading homework. "She's just lonely. Maybe just give her less to do." Don't ask her opinions so much. Let her stay out of the way. Stay out of the way. It was the kindest insult I had ever received. From that day forward, the basement became my space. At first, they said it was temporary, a quiet place for me to rest without going up and down the stairs. Then came the suggestions to settle in down there. They bought me a microwave, a mini fridge. Eric installed a second-hand TV. Mira even ordered me a blanket online, printed with the phrase, "Home is where your story begins." I started referring to it as my apartment, even though it had no bathroom and the air smelled faintly of mildew. I kept my things tidy. I ate separately. I barely went upstairs. I watched the family through windows and under doorways like a stranger peering into a life she no longer belonged to. Once, when I left a bag of groceries on the kitchen table, things I bought with my own money, Mira scoffed and said, "Please check with me before putting junk in the fridge. The kids have allergies." I had brought strawberries. Caleb was not allergic to strawberries. But I nodded, because what else do ghosts do? Eric's responses were always neutral. Safe. Mira means well. She's stressed. Can you both just try not to make it harder than it already is? He never chose a side, but his silence was always a shelter Mira knew she could live under. The worst part was that I began to believe them. I questioned my own presence. I questioned whether I had become a weight, dragging down a family that only wanted to rise. I began apologizing for walking too loudly, for using too much hot water, for sitting too long in the shared living room. I erased myself. Not because they asked me to, but because I thought that was the price of staying loved. I did not realize I had stopped existing until one evening, Mira threw a birthday party for her sister. Friends filled the backyard. The music was loud, laughter poured like champagne, and I stayed in the basement, lights off, listening. No one came to check on me, not even Emma. I went to the small mirror I kept over the utility sink. I looked at my reflection, at the creases that had deepened in the last year, at the eyes that used to sparkle when someone said, "Grandma." I could not remember the last time anyone had called me that with affection. I smiled at the mirror, as if to test whether I still could. I could, but it did not reach my eyes. That night, as I curled into the small bed in the corner of the basement, I whispered to myself, "You are not a guest. You are a memory they want to forget while still keeping the benefits of." And then I slept, still, quiet, and determined, because even ghosts have limits. And even a woman erased knows how to draw a line, even if it starts with a whisper in the dark. It started with a cough. Not a loud one, just a dry, persistent sound, like something inside me had begun to unravel slowly. I told myself it was just the weather. The basement was always damp, and fall in Baton Rouge brings cold with its own kind of cruelty, mold that clings to the walls, air that settles in your lungs like guilt. But by the third night, the cough deepened, and something warm and metallic touched the back of my throat. When I spat into the old sink beside my cot, the water turned pink. Still, I said nothing. You learn, after years of being an afterthought, that speaking up only gets you more silence in return. But that night, it got worse. It was well past midnight when I woke myself coughing so hard my ribs cramped. The blanket clung to my skin like wet paper. My chest burned. I tried sitting up, but the room tilted, and I nearly fell. Something inside me screamed, not just from pain, but from a fear I hadn't felt since the day I gave birth alone in a public hospital where no one remembered my name. I needed help. So I climbed the stairs. Each step felt like lifting a mountain. My knees buckled, my fingers trembled as I gripped the rail, lungs fluttering with every breath like they were made of thin thread. But I made it to the top, to the hallway that led to Eric and Mira's bedroom. The house was dark, but I could hear the faint buzz of Mira's phone behind the closed door. I knocked. Not hard, just enough, then again harder this time. The door opened with a click. Mira stood there in silk pajamas, her hair tied up in a loose knot. Her eyes scanned me, lips already curling. I tried to speak, but I coughed again, this time violently. My hand flew to my mouth, blood. She saw it too. For one fleeting second, I thought I saw concern in her eyes. But no, she lifted her phone and hit records, live. "Drama alert," she whispered into the camera, voice dripping with gleeful malice. It's midnight, and my mother-in-law is trying out for the role of lead actress in her own tragedy. Look at this, y'all. She turned the camera to me. I was hunched over, still coughing, my nightgown stained at the collar. She laughed. I told y'all she always finds a way to make everything about her. We were just trying to sleep. I looked at her, not out of anger, but disbelief. Not because she was filming, but because she found joy in it. Mira, I whispered, I think I need a doctor. She shrugged, then call one. My knees gave way. I reached out instinctively, toward the wall, toward anything? But my hand brushed only air. Then I saw Eric. He had been standing behind her, barefoot, arms crossed. He had watched the whole thing. I met his eyes. He looked tired, not shocked, not worried, just tired. I whispered, Eric. He took a step forward, then stopped. He turned around and walked away. Mira laughed again and ended the live stream. Well, that was fun. Go back downstairs, Mother. Try not to bleed on the carpet. I did not answer. I stood, barely, then turned back to the stairs. Each step down felt like falling deeper into the place they had built for me, not just below the house, but below memory. I reached the basement and sat on the edge of my bed. I stared at the spot on my hand where the blood had dried. That was the moment I stopped hoping. The next morning, I stayed in bed. The cough had eased slightly, maybe from the stillness, maybe because I had nothing left to give. I did not expect visitors. I did not want them. I did not need more pity disguised as resentment. But someone knocked. Soft. Hesitant. The door creaked open, and Emma stepped inside. She looked older than the day before, like something had cracked open in her overnight. She carried a small bag and a glass of water. Grandma, she said, whispering, I brought you something. She sat beside me on the cot and pulled out a bottle of over-the-counter cough syrup and a blister pack of fever meds. They won't notice I used my allowance. I wanted to cry, but I had no tears left. My body had used them all the night before. I took her hand. She let me. She leaned in and whispered, I saw the video. My heart stopped. They deleted it, she said quickly. But I saw it before. I don't understand, Grandma. Why do they hate you so much? I shook my head. They do not hate me, sweet girl. They just forgot how to see me. She held my hand tighter. You can stay with me, I said, half joking. She looked serious. I want to. I smiled then. Truly, for the first time in months. It hurts to smile. It hurt because it reminded me I still could. Later that day, Mira walked into the kitchen, laughing on the phone again. I overheard her say, Yeah, I had to delete it. Someone reported it. People are so sensitive now, like, it was just a joke. The old bat's fine. She did not know that Emma had watched, that her daughter had heard everything. But she would. Soon. Because something had shifted. Not just in me, but in the only person in that house still capable of love. That night, as I lay in bed, the fever finally broke. My body was still weak, but something inside me had turned to steel. I was done bleeding for people who stepped over my body to protect their comfort. And if they thought I was just a ghost, they were about to learn what ghosts are really capable of. After that night, after the coughing, the blood, the camera, the silence, I did not speak to either of them again. Not about anything that mattered. I made breakfast when asked. I nodded when necessary, but whatever warmth had once lingered in my bones toward that house and the people in it had gone cold. I did not ask for apologies because I knew none would come. What I wanted was something else, something I had never allowed myself to imagine having again. Power. It is a strange thing the moment you realize they have underestimated you completely, that you have become so invisible in their eyes, so small and unthreatening that they no longer guard their secrets around you. They speak freely. They leave documents on the counter. They mention plans in front of you like you are the wallpaper. A woman can go to war with nothing but silence and memory if she knows how to listen. Eric had been talking for months about building a studio, a private office for clients and investors, right next to the house. We'll make it a landmark, he told Mira one night while she folded laundry and I swept the floor beside them. Use the lot next door. Finally put it to use. Mira had nodded, barely paying attention. Just don't let your mom get sentimental. That dirt's worth money now. I am not living next to a park bench and rose garden. She did not know the truth. Neither of them did. The land next door, the long, narrow strip of pine-shadowed property that wrapped around the edge of the backyard, was not some leftover plot forgotten in a sea of deeds. It was mine. It had always been mine. I bought it in 1997 for a fraction of what it would be worth today. Back then the neighborhood was still new, the roads were still dirt, and the developers were eager to sell to anyone who could pay in cash. I never told Eric because I never thought I'd need to. But now I needed to. I still had the papers, tucked inside a fireproof box in the basement closet, alongside my husband's will, our old tax records, and a collection of birthday cards from decades past. I pulled out the deed one morning after everyone left for work and school. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from anticipation. The name on it was mine alone. And with that came an idea. A quiet, deliberate idea. I did not want to scream, or slam doors, or throw plates. I wanted something they would never see coming, something that would unfold so gently they would not realize what was happening until it was too late. So I made a call. To a lawyer first, one of the good ones, the kind that speaks in calm tones but makes the floor shake when they file a motion. I told her what I wanted to do. She asked twice if I was sure. I said very. Then I called a real estate broker, and then a developer, and finally a waste management company. There is a small irony to it. Mira once compared me to a dead rat. Now I was about to fill her horizon with garbage. Not metaphorically, literally. You see, the city had been searching for years for a site to build a secondary processing facility for industrial waste. Nothing toxic, just unsightly, loud, smelly, unpleasant. No one wanted it in their backyard, but I no longer considered that yard mine. I met the project manager at a diner near the freeway. He wore a yellow vest and smelled like diesel. He looked at the plat map I brought with me and said, "You know what this'll do to property values here?" I smiled. "Yes," he raised an eyebrow. "And you're okay with that?" I sipped my coffee. "I am more than okay." We signed the agreement that afternoon. The land would be sold for a modest sum. I did not care about the money. I cared about the lesson. A few weeks later, I heard trucks outside. Eric came home early that day. I watched from the basement window as he stood on the edge of the yard, phone in hand, pacing. Mira stormed out in her heels, yelling something I could not hear. From where I sat, I could see the bright orange flag staked into the dirt, the spray-painted lines marking where fences would go, the surveyors in neon vests measuring everything with cold precision. That evening, Eric came into the kitchen, slamming the fridge. "They're digging," he said to Mira. "I think it's a construction crew. Someone must have sold the lot." Mira wrinkled her nose. "What are they building?" Eric shook his head. "No clue. Maybe commercial. We might need to file a complaint, get the HOA involved." Mira shrugged. "Do what you need to do." She turned to me. "Oh," she said, feigning curiosity. "You remember who used to own that land, Mother?" I smiled sweetly. "I believe I do." And then I went back to washing dishes. The next week, a notice went up on the edge of the property. Permit approved and industrial use. Mira screamed when she saw it. Eric was pale. They argued for hours. Eric tried calling zoning officials, tried contacting the company. He paced, punched walls, told Mira he would sue whoever did this. Mira screamed that no one would want to come over anymore, that the parties, the photos, the ambiance, they were ruined. Eric stood in the backyard that night, staring at the lot like it had betrayed him. And I stood in the window behind the curtain, watching, waiting, knowing full well the name on the paperwork that made it all possible. Mine. The first sign was the sound. Not loud, not at first, just a low mechanical hum that started around 6 a.m. and didn't stop until dusk. It was the kind of sound that seeped into your bones, the kind that rattled the nerves even when the house was still, the kind of sound that doesn't just invade your home, it settles in your chest like a second heartbeat. The second sign was the smell, a sharp chemical scent that drifted in with the morning fog and lingered through dinner. Mira tried everything, candles, diffusers, incense, but the lavender couldn't mask ammonia. No essential oil could erase the truth. They still didn't know, not officially, until the trucks came, not one or two, but a convoy, cement mixers, steel girders, stacks of industrial piping. They parked along the edge of the property like soldiers preparing for siege. And then came the dust. Fine gray particles that coated the porch, the lawn furniture, the swing set in the backyard. Caleb started coughing. Mira panicked. She called the pediatrician, then the HOA, then the realtor. The answers were the same. Permits had been approved, nothing illegal, nothing to stop. The lot next door was now officially under development for a waste management site. Processing, storage, industrial runoff, all legal, all permanent. Within 3 weeks, 3 neighboring families moved out. The homes went up for sale with heavy discounts. No one made offers. The last neighbor who stayed, an elderly woman with a passion for gardening, stood in her front yard one morning as the bulldozers roared and said to Mira, "We used to live in paradise. Now it smells like death." Mira cried that night, not softly, not in grief, in rage. I heard her through the vents, shouting at Eric. "This is your fault. You told me this neighborhood was a gold mine. You told me we'd raise the kids in peace," Eric shouted back. "I didn't sell the damn land, Mira, but you didn't buy it either," she screamed. "You let whoever owned it walk away with our future." The next day, Eric didn't go to work. He stayed home, pacing. That evening, he knocked on the basement door. I didn't answer right away. When I opened it, he stood there, with his head bowed like a schoolboy sent to apologize. He cleared his throat. "Mom, we need to talk." I stepped aside, letting the silence fill the space between us. He didn't sit. "I found out," he said. "About the land, about the company, about what you did." I said nothing. "I get it," he went on, voice breaking. "You're angry, and maybe you should be. Maybe we deserved it, but the kids, Emma, Caleb, they don't. They're just starting school. No one wants to come over. Emma cries at night, Caleb's scared of the trucks, Mira's—" He paused. "She's not doing well. None of us are." Still, I didn't speak. He looked at me, eyes red. "I'm begging you, sell it back to us, or to someone else. Just undo this, please." I studied his face, and for the first time, I saw the boy I used to hold against my chest, the boy who used to draw on the walls and whisper, "Look, Mama, it's you." But I also saw the man who watched me bleed on the floor and said nothing. I reached for my phone. I typed one line, then handed it to him. He read the message silently. "I'm just a corpse, remember? Corpses don't make decisions." He looked at me, stunned, and for the first time in years I walked past him, shoulders straight, head high, and left him standing in the basement doorway, holding the weight of his own silence. By the time they moved out, the house felt hollow, not because it was empty. No, it had been emotionally vacant for years, but because there was no goodbye. No slammed doors, no final insults. Just silence. Boxes disappeared in the night. The for sale sign went up quietly, and a week later, the lights went out for good. They did not leave a forwarding address. I heard from the neighbor that they moved north, somewhere near Atlanta. Mira had cousins there. Eric didn't tell me, but I did not expect him to. For a while, I stayed in the basement, even after they left. I could have taken the master suite upstairs the very next day, but I didn't. It wasn't about comfort anymore. It was about remembering who I was when they thought I was nothing. That version of me, the woman in the cold basement with lungs full of blood and hands full of silence, she was the one who saved me. But eventually, I climbed the stairs. I walked slowly through each room, touching the walls like reading Braille on the surface of old wounds. The master bedroom still smelled faintly of Mira's perfume, something expensive and artificial, the kind that clung like judgment. Eric's office was exactly as he left it, clean, cold, efficient. The realtor barely made eye contact when he delivered the final sale documents. The price had dropped more than 40%. No one wanted a mansion next to an industrial waste site. He told me, apologetically, "It's a shame, really. This place was beautiful once." I signed the paperwork without a word. And just like that, the house was mine again, not by gift, not by accident, but by deliberate, lawful purchase. I didn't renovate, I didn't repaint, I didn't erase the past. I preserved it. Room by room, I cleaned every surface with my own hands, not to beautify, but to reclaim. I washed away the dust, but left the memories. I wanted this house to remember who had lived here. and who had been forgotten in it. The only thing I did change was the locks, especially on 2 doors, the master bedroom and the upstairs office. I bought heavy antique brass locks, custom made. I did not touch the furniture inside. I did not move a single paperclip or drawer. I simply closed the doors and locked them. Those rooms became shrines, not to love or loss, but to boundaries, to memory, to the kind of hurt that does not scream, but simply refuses to open the door again. The rest of the house I kept open, warm, lived in. Emma came to visit often. Sometimes she stayed for weeks. She helped me plant new flowers in the backyard, ones that could survive even the tainted breeze from the processing center next door. We joked that even the roses here had to be tough. One afternoon, while folding laundry, Emma asked if I ever planned to unlock those doors. I shook my head. Some spaces, I said, deserve to stay closed. She nodded. She understood more than most adults ever would. Every year, on Eric's birthday, I send him a card. Nothing poetic, no bitterness, just a photograph of the locked door, always the same angle, always the same light, and below it, the same handwritten note. Once it was yours, but your heart was never big enough to hold it. He never replies, but he never blocks my number either. That's enough. That silence tells me more than any apology ever could. It tells me he remembers. It tells me he looks. It tells me the door, though closed, still haunts him. I don't know where they live now. I don't ask. Emma tells me only what I need to know. Caleb is taller than me now. Mira still yells too much. Eric still works too much. Nothing much has changed except one thing. They no longer own anything they once used to brag about. The house, the land, the name on the mailbox, it all belongs to me again. But more than that, I belong to me again. I heard his car before I saw it. The gravel still makes the same crunch beneath tires, no matter how long you've been gone. It was late afternoon, the sun low, slicing through the blinds with golden streaks. I was in the kitchen pouring tea when I heard the front gate creak open. I did not rush to the door. When you've lived long enough, you learn to let people come to you. Eric stood at the threshold for a long moment. He looked older. Not in the graceful way, no, in the worn-down way of someone who's been walking in circles for years, trying to find their own exit. He took off his shoes before stepping in. That small gesture told me he remembered this house still had rules. He did not ask for coffee. He did not ask for forgiveness. He just sat down, hands folded, voice low. "Mama," he said, "I'm not here to take the house. I'm not asking for anything." I said nothing. He stared down at his hands, like he did when he was a boy and broke a neighbor's window. But this wasn't glass. It was history. "I just want to know," he said finally, "if you still see me as your son." The silence after that was thick, but not empty. I didn't cry. I didn't lash out. I didn't hold up a list of grievances. Instead, I walked to the drawer beside the old fireplace, the one no one touched but me. I opened it slowly and pulled out something wrapped in linen. A piece of paper, yellowed with age, torn at the edges, mended awkwardly with strips of tape, but held together all the same. It was a drawing, Eric's drawing, a child's attempt at art, a house with crooked walls, a tree too green for the season, a mother and child holding hands, their smiles wide and naive. He looked at it like it was a ghost. "I drew that when I was 7, he whispered. "You did," I replied. "I thought you threw it away." "I did," I said quietly. "I tore it, out of fear, because I was scared you'd chase a dream that would starve you." He looked at me then, not with anger, but with something worse, regret. I placed the mended drawing into his hands. "But in the end," I said, "you tore me too. With your silence, with the way you stood still while others unmade me." He held the paper like it would disintegrate. His fingers trembled. There were no more words. He left the house without asking for anything else, and this time, I locked the door behind him. Emma arrived the following week. She was taller than I remembered, 17 and standing like a woman who had decided what she would and would not allow in her life. Her backpack was slung over one shoulder, suitcase behind her. She didn't ask if she could stay. She just said, "I'm home." It wasn't long before Mira, came tearing down the driveway like a storm in heels. She didn't knock, she pounded. When I opened the door, Emma stood behind me. Mira didn't speak to me. She lunged straight toward her daughter. The slap rang through the porch like a pistol. "You ungrateful little bitch!" she screamed. "I'm your mother. You leave me, leave your father, just to live with that old corpse?" Emma didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She looked her mother in the eye and said, calm and quiet, "You were abandoned by your parents too, remember? But you chose to walk away. Well, now you understand. I'm doing the same. I'm just not screaming while I do it." Mira stood frozen. Eric was behind her, but he said nothing, as always. I shut the door, and this time it stayed shut. Now Emma lives here. She sleeps in what used to be Mira's room. It's a library now, shelves filled with novels and old art books. The windows are always open. The walls are painted the soft blue of peace. We cook together, we argue about music, we laugh about things too small for anyone else to notice. She's not just my granddaughter. She's my friend. And sometimes, late at night, we sit by the fireplace and talk about everything we didn't get to say when she was younger. She asked me once, "Do you hate them?" I shook my head. "No," I said, "but I also don't follow people into burning houses just because they're family." She nodded. And I told her one thing, only once, something I want her to carry, even when I'm gone. "Don't hate your parents," I said, "but never let blood be the reason you stay somewhere no one loves you right." She reached for my hand, held it tight. And in that moment I knew, the line of silence ends with us. We are not what they made. We are what we chose to become. ___ Mira betrayed him. No one was surprised. The man was younger, smoother, dripping honeyed lies about a life with no old mother to care for, no daughter who questioned, only soft freedom and fresh starts. Mira believed him, poor child, believed him like it was her first time falling in love instead of her first time throwing love away. She left Eric, quick, clean, certain. A month later the man was gone, so was the car, so was the money. All that remained was a trail of debt and a false name on a plastic card. Eric didn't rage, he never did. Silence was always his armor, and now his wound. But he called, not her, me. Emma answered, said his voice was broken, like something old inside him had finally cracked. "Mama," he said. That was all, one word, and everything he never said before spilled through the quiet. He didn't ask forgiveness, didn't beg, just whispered, "I understand now. I finally do." And then the line went still. He asked if he could see me, just once, not to ask anything, just to say what should have been said long ago. Emma looked at me, held the phone like a question. "Should I give it to you, Grandma?" I was in the garden. The roses were blooming again, stubborn little things, blooming through the stink of trucks and rot and the memory of betrayal. I heard her. Of course I did. But I didn't turn around, didn't speak, didn't nod. I just kept watering the roots. One flower, then the next, letting the silence say what years of words never could. Emma didn't ask again because she understood. Some wounds don't want healing. Some people come home too late. Not because they were left behind, no, because they chose to leave first. Eric never called again, and I never said another word about it. I opened my doors to light, to flowers, to Emma, but never again to the past. Not once more. Not ever. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. Some stories aren't told for pity. They're told for clarity. Because silence may protect the heart, but it also keeps the truth buried. And at my age, I've got no time left for burying anything. If this story reminded you of someone, or of something you've carried too long in silence, you're not alone. And if you want to hear more truths like this, the kind that sit with you long after the story ends, you're welcome to stay. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories, where the quietest women in the room finally speak and the world listens.